Hello, a very warm welcome to all my dear class 7 students. Welcoming you back all to our English class once again. We have been doing some lessons and today we have to start with a new story that is fire, friend and foe. Okay? We all know what is fire. We have fire at home. We use it for different purposes, right? But before discussing about what fire is, I want you to think of a person. There are some persons, okay, who appears to be our friend one day and the other day they do not support us in any way that we need their help, right? So this is also going to be a story like that. We are going to discuss about a person or an object that is like that. In some ways they are very helpful to us, but in the other way they might prove very dangerous. You can think of a character, right? When at school, you know there are some friends who will always talk to you very well when they need a help from you, but the day they do not need your help, they become so indifferent to you. They will act as if they do not even notice you coming into the classroom, right? These are some characters that we experience in our daily lives, and in this lesson we are going to discuss about fire, which is a friend and foe. A friend, I do not have to explain that again, but a foe means an enemy or a rival. A person who is against you is called a foe, okay? And for this chapter, you will find it in page number 114 till 118. You will find some more pages behind that, but the story is found between these pages. So I'm requesting you all to flip your pages to page number 114, okay? 114, we are going to discuss some words like chemical reaction, which appears almost like your science subject, but I'm reminding you once again that this is your English class, okay? And then we will, under chemical reaction, we will see oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen, which all combines to produce fire, okay? There will also be a flash point. Flash point means the temperature at which heat is produced, okay? You know that when a piece of cloth is wet, they cannot burn because heat cannot be produced from there. But the flash point is the point where the temperature is right to produce a fire by us, okay? And also you will see three things that are needed for fire. That is fuel. You can think of fuel, right? You have some people use firewood as fuel, some people will use charcoal, some people will use LPG, right? Those are the different kinds of fuels that we use. So we need fuel, oxygen, and heat. And even if you have fuel, it will not be able to burn unless there is oxygen in it, right? We do not see oxygen, but we know that oxygen is present around us. So these are some things that we are going to discuss today, okay? In your SS classes, you have learned about how human beings discovered fire. Earlier, human beings do not eat cooked food like the present times. They will just hunt, they will just search for fruits and wild plants and have their food. They will not even have cooked food, but they might have observed. We know that they see fire only through lightnings, right? Lightnings and volcanoes where heat is produced, where fire is produced. When there is a lightning, we know that lightning strikes a tree and then they will burn. And I'm taking you back to the SS class where you have learned how early men discovered fire. They discovered fire by accident. They also saw that when lightning strikes a tree, fire is produced, and they might also have tasted some roasted kind of meat, and then they slowly got to know the benefits of fire, and that is how they discovered fire and also its usage. We know fire is very important for us. You can imagine of a week without fire, and when I say fire, you can also think of the gas that you use for cooking, the firewood. We use different means, but without fire, I'm sure we will not be able to survive. It's as important as water. We know water is always required by our body for our works, for different issues, right? And so likewise, fire is also one of the most important thing that we need to survive, okay? And fire is produced. Fire is the process of a chemical reaction where oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen in the air comes together. When they come together, it is a chemical reaction is produced from which we get fire. Okay, so you have to know the main things, the main components of air that is needed to make fire. I repeat, oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon. These are the things that are required to produce fire, and it is a chemical reaction. Early men might be wondering at how fire is produced, right? They might even be thinking that it's a miracle that is from above. But now, with the knowledge that we gain from different subjects, and especially from science, we learn that it is just a chemical reaction. When they come together, we know fire is produced, right? And in order to make fire for us in our daily lives, what do we need? As I've explained, fuel, oxygen, and heat. We need fuel, oxygen, and heat. Here, fuel, oxygen, and heat will be the fuel, as I've told you. It may be firewood, it may be a piece of paper. A piece of paper can also be called as a fuel because you can burn that, right? Fuel, oxygen is needed, and then heat. And in our case, what we usually do, you can think of a matchstick, right? We heat because when we strike the matchstick, it produces heat, and because of that heat, fire is produced. And all these three together combines to make fire. These are the things that we need, and we know that fire is a very essential part of our life. But one thing we also need to know is oxygen and fuel alone cannot produce fire. You can think of a paper lying on the floor, right? A paper or a firewood lying on the floor, and then oxygen is always present in the air. So will that be enough to make a fire? No, right? We all know if that is the case, everything on earth would be on fire by now, because you cannot just leave a paper on the floor which is dry and then oxygen is obviously present there. Fire cannot be produced. And so we also need heat, a certain temperature, a certain point of temperature, which is also called the flash point, right? Because with that we make fire. Even if we have the required materials, without heat, fire cannot be produced. And so the point at which fire is generated or fire comes out is called the flash point. It needs a certain level of temperature. If it is too cold, we cannot make fire, and if it is below the burning point, we know that fire cannot be produced from there. One thing that I'm going to point it out to you, okay? Here in page number 115, it is sometimes said that fire is a good servant but a bad master. It only means that fire is very useful as long as it is kept under control. I want you to mark that in page number 115, the second paragraph. It is just a three lines paragraph with two sentences. And so here, it says that fire is a good servant as long okay, let us take the example of a servant, okay? If someone is working for you, that person is serving you, you call that a servant, right? And so when you guide them, the servants work very well. But when you allow the fire to become your master, if you allow fire to control you, how will it be if you don't have it under control? It can prove very dangerous to all of us, right? Not only to you and your family, but fire can prove very dangerous to the people around you. Because once your house catches fire, you can imagine that. Once your house catches fire, this is not only your building, but also the adjoining and the adjacent buildings that gets disturbed. Even if they do not get burned, they will be scared that even their houses will be burned. And we have seen, even in our own place, okay? We are not discussing about the world right now. Think of your town, think of your village, your city. You might have seen, especially houses in the towns are very close to one another. If one house catches fire or if there's a short circuit in the house because of the wirings, and then if it catches fire, we know that it goes on to the next building and the next and so on. Every year, the Department of Fire and Emergency Service spends a lot of money, okay? You may not be aware of these things. For some of you, your parents might have told you, or you might have come across this from the newspapers. We know that a lot of money is spent in order to prevent fire. and there people are still working to work ways to prevent fire. And even the buildings, we know we want to make our building earthquake proof, fire proof, all these things. And because of this, people spend a lot of extra expenditure on this, okay? And this is why we say that fire is a good servant, but it would be a bad master. Once they start controlling, they will destroy everything around them. We have to be very careful, and not only in the management of fire here, even in our lives there are some things like that. If you use them well, I want to cite the example of mobile phones right now. A majority of the students are starting to get addicted to mobile phones, right? And if you know how to use your gadgets, your mobile phones carefully, it will help you a lot. Mobile phones and fire can be compared here. They are almost the same, because if you know how to use your gadgets, you will get a lot of benefits from it. You can even learn a lot of lesson related activities from your phones. But if you do not know how to use it and that phone becomes your master, how will it be? It can be very dangerous again. You might be addicted to some games. You are in class 7, I know. Many of you are still not in the stage. And there are some parents who are wise enough not to give phones to their children at this stage. But sometimes situation compels us that we need to use it. So in that case, I'm reminding you all that mobile phones can be very similar to fire in our lives in the present day. If you do not know how to use it, it will be a bad master, and then it can even ruin your life. You will not want to study anymore. These are some things that we need to realize, okay? So, like we have learned that there are 3 very important points, very important elements to make fire. The same thing, okay? There are 3 main ways to douse of fire again. Douse means to put away fire again. We know in the first place that oxygen is very important to make fire, right? I want you to look at the board, okay? Oxygen is very important to make fire, but if you try to put out the fire, okay, if you try to put out the oxygen, that means fire can be stopped. Take the example here. If you prevent oxygen from entering the area where the fire is erupting, the fire can be stopped. Okay, how do we do that? Sometimes people wrap, if there is a small object burning and you want to put it off before it gets scattered, people usually cover it with a piece of wet cloth or sackcloth, right? So when they do that, the passage of oxygen is blocked, and that is how fire can be stopped. And another thing is, we know that heat. Heat is also one of the causing factors of fire. So in order to put away the heat, the same thing can be applied. Either a piece of wet cloth, if it is applicable, you can use that. Or what we do, in order to put the light of a burning match, what do? You blow it off, right? And here, when you blow it off, you will blow away the oxygen that is present in that area, okay? You will blow away the oxygen present in that area, and then the fire will automatically stop. And the third point is the heat. That heat, we know that heat is one of the most important thing. As I have told you, if you just keep a paper or a firewood on the floor, it will not burn unless heat is applied to it, okay? Likewise, in order to blow away the warm air present near the fire, if you blow, the cold air would go near the fire and then put it off. And fuel, the last thing, and also one of the most important here, is fuel. If we know that if you keep a fire unattended for hours, it would stop burning. Imagine, I would want you to picture your kitchen fireplace, okay, the hearth. Some of you don't use the firewood for cooking, but we all know what is firewood, right? Especially the ones living in the villages are lucky enough to possess both LPG and then the firewood. And it is such a joy to sit by the fireside, right? And so, if you keep some firewood for burning in the fireplace, but you stop attending to that and you stop putting more fuels to that, okay? You stop putting more fuels to that, the fire would just stop, isn't it? The fire would just stop. And one way, I'm going to give a recap of these 3 points. One way, like we need three things for fire, there are also three main points for putting out fire. The easiest one is to stop adding more fuel to the fire. To stop adding more fuel to the fire. And the second one is to stop the passage of oxygen. Okay, to stop the passage of oxygen into the area where there is fire. And then the third is to remove heat. Like I've told you the example of how a matchstick can be blown off by blowing cold air around that area. And so these are the things. And one thing that the department and also we also know that oil burns very well, right? Any kind of oil burns very well. So it is also very dangerous to put water, okay? To put water to a burning oil. Why? Because if there is an area where there is oil and it's burning, if you put water to it, the water will just flow down easily along with the oil. And we know that when we put water into a place where there is oil, the oil is lighter and that it floats on the surface of the water, isn't it? It floats on the surface of the water, and that is the reason why the water can carry the burning fire to places where you don't even expect, and they will still continue to burn. And so in this kind of things, we should know that it's very risky for us, it's very dangerous for us to put water into a burning oil. Okay, in this kind of cases we need to use carbon fire extinguishers. Carbon fire extinguishers, in any case, if you happen to see anything like this, you should be the one. If there is people around you who are ignorant about this idea, sometimes even if we know, in hurry or when we panic, we tend to do things in the wrong way. But you should always be wise enough to know that it is dangerous to pour water in a place where fire has emerged because of oil. Okay, this is one thing that we all need to know. And there are so many points that we will be discussing again in this chapter. Okay, you will get to know how we should work in order to put a fire off in a building where there is electric short circuit. Okay, we know that a lot of fire is caused because of the electric short circuits. In these things, we also should know what to do in which condition, because unless you know, even if you are smart, even if you are active, that would not be of much help to you. Okay, this is one thing we need to keep in our mind. In olden days, what people do is, when there is a house that caught fire, if a house had caught fire, the villagers, the people will form a chain of human beings. A chain of human beings here means they would line up, okay, and go near a well or a pond. In villages, you see that a lot, right? There will be big wells, there will be big ponds. So they will line up and then pass buckets of water. Because if a person is going to carry a bucket of water and rush to that spot, a lot of time would be wasted. And so they would be passing 2-3 buckets of water at the same time, and then instead of running and wasting their energy, and also instead of wasting their time, they would just line up, pass on the buckets, and then they would throw water. And even to this day, we still practice that. When we cannot call up the fire and emergency services very quickly, we have to do something to help, not only for yourself, but you also have to know that it's important to help people who are around you. Okay, it is very important to help. It is not only them who will suffer, but we also will be affected in some ways. When your neighbors are suffering, you should be the one to step out. And so these are some things that we have learned in this lesson. I'm just going to give you a quick recap. We have to leave half of the chapter for the next class, because our chapter here is a bit lengthy, and I'm sure by listening to the explanations given here, because this type of lessons, when you read by yourself, some students will find it boring. Okay, but when you listen to the explanations, you will also learn better. So I'm requesting you to join again even in the next class in order to help me cooperate and complete this lesson that we have started today. Thank you all so much for listening.